Snow falls differently across the Canadian imagination. It does not arrive as spectacle, nor as disruption, but as atmosphere, steady, unannounced, absorbed into routine. Many Americans arrive expecting a colder version of home, a northern mirror with familiar accents and familiar stores. At first glance, the skyline of Toronto or the glass towers of Vancouver seem to confirm that assumption. Highways stretch wide. Coffee cups steam in gloved hands. English fills the air. The surface resemblance feels reassuring. Yet the surprise begins in subtler places. Americans often notice the quiet first, not silence, but a softened public rhythm. Conversations in cafes rarely compete for dominance. Disagreements, when they surface, tend to dissolve into careful phrasing. Even in busy intersections, there is an undercurrent of restraint, as if the volume of daily life has been gently lowered. The pace is not slow, yet it is measured. Urgency rarely spills outward. In shops and offices, Americans frequently sense a distinct emotional calibration. Customer service interactions unfold with patience rather than performative enthusiasm. There is politeness, but it is not theatrical. The exchange feels mutual rather than transactional. This tone extends beyond commerce. In workplaces, ambition exists, but it is often framed within collective stability rather than individual triumph. The atmosphere prizes reliability over spectacle. Many Americans expect a cultural twin, instead they encounter a society subtly oriented around consensus. Public conversations lean toward compromise. Pride expresses itself quietly, embedded in institutions rather than broadcast through slogans. National identity appears less declarative and more assumed, carried in shared healthcare systems, public broadcasting, and civic rituals that emphasize inclusion over assertion. The landscape itself reinforces this emotional climate. Cities dissolve quickly into forests, lakes, and open sky. Proximity to nature feels less recreational and more structural, shaping weekend routines and seasonal habits. Winter is endured not with complaint but with preparation. Boots line hallways. Jackets accumulate in orderly rows. The environment is not battled, it is accommodated. In social gatherings, Americans sometimes notice an absence of overt hierarchy. Success is acknowledged but rarely dramatized. Self-promotion softens into understatement. Even humor leans toward self-deprecation rather than dominance. There is pride, certainly, yet it rarely seeks center stage. What Americans do not expect is how these small calibrations accumulate. The lowered volume of public life, the preference for consensus, the steady presence of collective systems, together they create a different emotional temperature. It is not colder. It is steadier. And within that steadiness, many Americans begin to sense that Canada is not a reflection, but a distinct rhythm waiting beneath the snow. Beneath that steadiness lies a social choreography that many Americans gradually begin to decode. In public debates, disagreement often moves indirectly. Critique is cushioned in context. Strong opinions are framed as perspectives rather than declarations. The cultural reflex leans toward maintaining social fabric, even when tensions rise. Americans accustomed to sharper rhetorical edges frequently notice how rarely conversations escalate into confrontation. The absence of open friction can feel, at first, like hesitation. Over time, it reveals itself as preservation. In offices and classrooms, collaboration carries an almost instinctive priority. Meetings tend to circulate around the table rather than orbit a single voice. Leadership often presents itself as facilitation rather than command. Many Americans observe that authority here performs restraint. The goal appears less about standing out and more about ensuring cohesion. Achievement matters, yet it is frequently contextualized within team success. Public praise is measured. Individual recognition blends into collective accomplishment. Even expressions of national pride follow this pattern. Canadians rarely narrate their identity in grand terms. Instead, identity emerges through reference to shared systems, healthcare, public transit, multicultural policy, seasonal rituals. Americans often expect overt patriotism and instead encounter a quiet confidence embedded in infrastructure. Flags exist, but they do not dominate the skyline. Celebration feels grounded rather than triumphant. Seasonal shifts intensify these contrasts. Winter compresses social life inward. Community centers glow in early darkness. Neighborhood skating rinks fill with families bundled in layers. Americans sometimes expect complaint about the cold, yet more often they encounter adaptation. There is an unspoken understanding that climate shapes character. Patience is practiced not only with people, but with weather itself. In social circles, Americans may sense a careful balance between friendliness and privacy. Invitations arrive gradually. Friendships deepen steadily rather than dramatically. There is warmth, but it unfolds over time. Personal boundaries are respected almost instinctively. The emotional climate favors stability over intensity. Small rituals reinforce this pattern. Apologies surface easily, even for minor inconveniences. Lines form organically without overt instruction. Public space is treated as shared terrain rather than contested ground. Americans often remark on the frequency of courtesy, doors held open, conversations softened, disputes diffused. These gestures accumulate into a civic atmosphere that feels intentionally maintained. Gradually, the realization settles: what seemed like a northern extension of home operates on a subtly different moral architecture. The emphasis on compromise, the instinct toward inclusion, the preference for understatement, these are not surface traits. They are structural values. And as days turn into months, many Americans begin to notice that their own cadence shifts slightly, aligning with the quieter rhythm around them. With time, that alignment becomes more than behavioral, it becomes perceptual. Many Americans find that their sense of urgency recalibrates. The constant hum of competition that once framed achievement begins to soften. Success is still pursued, yet it feels less theatrical, less tethered to visible assertion. Conversations revolve less around personal milestones and more around shared stability, housing, healthcare access, community programs, seasonal plans. The horizon of aspiration subtly widens from individual advancement to collective continuity. Public discourse reinforces this shift. News cycles, though attentive to controversy, rarely amplify spectacle with the same intensity Americans may be accustomed to. Political disagreements unfold within a narrower emotional bandwidth. The language of compromise appears not as weakness but as civic maturity. Over months and years, many Americans sense that emotional energy once spent defending positions is redirected toward preserving equilibrium. Daily habits begin to mirror this atmosphere. Walking through neighborhoods, Americans may notice their own voices lowering in volume. Impatience in traffic diminishes. Even digital interactions adopt a gentler cadence. The cultural expectation of consideration becomes internalized. What once felt like restraint starts to feel like ease. The transformation often reveals itself most clearly during visits back to the United States. Familiar landscapes appear louder, more declarative. Advertising seems more insistent. Political rhetoric feels sharper at the edges. Americans who have lived in Canada frequently describe a moment of contrast, not judgment, but heightened awareness of difference. The steadiness once perceived as subdued now registers as grounding. Yet the shift does not erase identity. Rather, it layers it. Many Americans retain their drive, their openness, their expressive confidence. But alongside these traits grows a comfort with consensus, an appreciation for moderated tone, or respect for collective systems. The experience does not replace one cultural instinct with another, it expands the emotional vocabulary through which daily life is interpreted. In the end, what Americans never expect about life in Canada is not simply politeness or winter endurance. It is the cumulative effect of a society that prioritizes cohesion over display, preparation over improvisation, balance over dominance. The surprise lies in how quietly transformative this environment can be. Under the vast northern sky, amid forests and glass towers, a different rhythm persists, not louder, not brighter, but steady. And within that steadiness, many Americans discover a recalibrated sense of what it means to belong within a shared civic landscape.